Think about being dispatched to one of the most far-flung locations on Earth, not to conquer it, not to fight a war, but to study it. In 1881, a band of American adventurers has gone into the Arctic as the U plan of a scientific expedition. They were under the command of Lieutenant Adolphus Greely, 25 men in all, soldiers, scientists, engineers, and explorers. Their destination was Lady Franklin Bay in the Canadian High Arctic. There, they created an isolated scientific base known as Fort Conger. Their assignment was to take weather observations, research the atmosphere, track the movement of ice, and of us two people who knew how to get scientific information from one of the least understood places on Earth. The expedition was part of the international venture called the First International Polar Year. The men anticipated adversity, but they also expected help. They were to be supplied soon. Provisions and supplies would come in, and when the mission was over, they would return home. At least, it was all part of the plan. The expedition arrived at Fort Conger, and for a time, everything seemed to be functioning. Installed were scientific instruments. Observations got underway. The men ranged into the surrounding Arctic wilds. A few had gone even farther north than nearly all of them. But then, the system of supply broke down. Ships scrambled to reach them. Ships scrambled to reach them. The Arctic ice would have none of it, and the men at Fort Conger were being cut off. They had come into the Arctic to make history. They did not know. They are about to be drawn into one of its darkest tales of survival and death. Winter came. Now another season slipped by. The men waited for relief, but the ships did not come. It was running out of supplies. There was famine, clothing wears out, and the Arctic provided almost no means of replacing what they had lost. The expedition had already carried out most of its scientific work, but that was no longer the biggest worry. Survival was. In 1883, things had become so bad. The men were ordered to abandon Fort Conger. They started heading south. They hauled boats and supplies over frozen terrain. It was an exhausting journey. The men crossed sea ice. The men crossed sea ice. Open water, rugged cliffs and boulders, and icy, frigid Arctic straits. Every mile had been crammed with exertion. Eventually, they reached Cape Sabine. But there was no safety at Cape Sabine. It was a snare. The men had little food. They were dressed tattered, their clothes worn out. They were weakened in body, and winter was coming again, and soon. They constructed a primitive camp, then waited and waited. The rescue ships were to come, but once again, the Arctic prevented them from arriving. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. The men were getting weaker. Disease spread. Starvation followed. Some died from exposure. Others simply are too weak to go on. The scientific expedition had evolved into a harrowing fight for survival. Then, it was even darker. Reports from the survivors and subsequent investigations revealed signs of extreme battery as starvation took hold. The men were not now fighting the Arctic to complete their mission. They were fighting it just to get through another day, and still, no rescue arrived. By the spring of 1884, the Greely Expedition was unrecognizable. 25 men had entered the Arctic. Now, only a small number managed to stay alive. Just a few were left alive. The party at Cape Sabine was crowded with proof of disaster. Empty garbage of cooked food, damaged equipment, discarded supplies, and men who died in the winter, and the graves. On June 22nd, 1884. At last, a salvage ship raced to the survivors. Those who came ashore expected to find a party of the expedition. Instead, they met 6 famished men. Only 6. 19 of the original expedition had perished. The rescue was one of the most dramatic, bring-'em-home-alive polar exploits of all time. But it was also controversial. How had the expedition come to be in such a disastrous state? If the rescue system had worked, why had these men been left waiting for all that time? And what decisions had transformed a scientific mission into one for survival? There were accusations of poor planning and worse. Others blamed the communications accomplishment. The extreme Arctic climate was ruinous, and the delay in reaching the expedition turned a tragedy in the making into one. But there was another unsettling aspect of the story. The survivors were later interrogated about what had transpired at Cape Sabine. Stories of cannibalism appeared. The accusation stunned the public. Some survivors denied or refused to talk about the specifics. Others were saying the facts had been misread. For decades, the Greely Expedition came to be identified not only with Arctic exploration, but with the shadowy extremes of human endurance. Today, the journey has passed into ecclesiastical memory as a cautionary tale. The Arctic is more than a frozen terrain. It can sequester people in the rest of the world. It can bust supply lines, and it can turn a scientific mission into a struggle against hunger, cold, and fatigue. 25 men entered the far north. Only 6 came home. Their scientific records survived. Their photographs survived. Their stories survived. But the Arctic held out another thing, the memory of the men who never came back. And perhaps the most haunting part of the Greely Expedition is not that they became lost in the Arctic. It is that they were not really lost at all. Not really lost at all. They knew where they were. They knew help was coming. They just needed to wait, in one of the harshest spots on Earth, to boot, for someone to reach them. And for 19 men, that rescue came too late.